I thanked him with a smile when he told me he was leaving me for his secretary. 23 years of marriage, and those were the only words I could muster as he dropped his bombshell over our usual Sunday morning coffee. My name is Avery, and I've spent half my life being the perfect wife to a man who just told me I wasn't enough anymore. You're thanking me? Jonah's coffee cup froze halfway to his lips, his familiar wrinkles deepening in confusion. Avery, did you hear what I said? Crystal clear. I took another sip of my coffee, savouring its bitter warmth. Her name is Claire, she's 29, and you've been sleeping with her for 6 months. How did you? Your cologne changed. You started working late on Thursdays, and you've been clearing your browser history religiously. I set down my cup with deliberate care. I'm not stupid, Jonah. I never was. He had the decency to look ashamed, but only briefly. I didn't plan this, Avery. It just happened. Claire. She understands me. She challenges me. Unlike your boring housewife who put you through medical school. The words slipped out before I could stop them. That was 20 years ago. People change. We've grown apart. As we take a brief pause, we'd love to know where you're watching from today. Drop your location in the comments below. Now, back to our story. I glanced around our kitchen, the one I'd decorated, the one where I'd packed countless lunches and kissed countless hurts better. Our daughter Audrey's graduation photos smiled down from the wall next to Gary's latest baseball team picture. Have you told the kids? I asked, though I already knew the answer. Not yet. I wanted to tell you first. He reached across the table for my hand. I pulled back. Don't. My voice was steady. When are you moving out? I've found an apartment. I can be gone by next weekend. He paused. Claire's waiting for me. Of course she was. Perfect, young Claire with her perfect makeup and designer clothes, paid for by my husband's successful medical practice, the one I'd helped him build while putting my own dreams on hold. Mum, Gary's voice from the doorway made us both jump. Our 18-year-old son stood there in his pajamas, eyes darting between us. What's going on? Your father was just leaving, I said, standing up. He has something to tell you and your sister later. Avery, Jonah started. Later, I repeated firmly. Gary, honey, would you put some coffee on? I need to make a phone call. I walked calmly to my home office, closed the door, and picked up my phone. My hands weren't shaking, that surprised me. Eleanor, it's me. Can you come over? I listened to my best friend's concerned voice. No, I'm fine. Actually, I'm better than fine. Remember that contingency plan we talked about? It's time. After hanging up, I opened my laptop and logged into an email account Jonah knew nothing about. Dr. Ava Stone had 3 consulting requests waiting, including one from a prestigious hospital in Boston. I allowed myself a small smile. The knock on my door came sooner than expected. Mom. It was Audrey, home from college for the weekend. Dad's acting weird and Gary says something's wrong. I opened the door to find both my children looking worried. Behind them, Jonah hovered uncertainly in the hallway. Family meeting, I announced. Living room now. As we gathered, I caught my reflection in the window, a woman in her 40s still attractive despite the subtle signs of aging. I'd spent years being invisible, and now... Your father has something to tell you, I said, sitting down between my children on the couch. Jonah cleared his throat. I'm moving out. Your mother and we're getting divorced. The explosion was immediate. Gary jumped up, fists clenched. Audrey burst into tears. It's Claire, isn't it? Audrey's voice was acid. Your secretary? Really, Dad? How could you? Gary's face was red with anger. After everything Mum's done for you. I touched their shoulders gently. Your father's made his choice. We'll get through this. But Mom, Audrey turned to me, mascara running. What are you going to do? You've never even had a job. That's what they all thought. My children, my husband, our friends. Poor Avery, the devoted housewife who sacrificed everything for her family. They had no idea. Don't worry about me, I said, meeting Jonah's eyes across the room. I'll manage just fine. Eleanor arrived 20 minutes later, after Jonah had left, and the kids had retreated to their rooms. She found me in the kitchen, calmly making fresh coffee. "So," she said, sliding onto a bar stool, "are you ready to show them who Dr. Ava Stone really is?" I handed her a steaming cup. "Not yet. First, I want to watch him squirm." "The hospital's financial troubles aren't going away," Elena reminded me. "Sooner or later, he'll need Dr. Stone's help." "I know." I smiled that same smile I'd given Jonah earlier. "And won't that be interesting?" "Dr. Stone, your insight on this case has been invaluable," Dr. Mann's voice carried clearly through my laptop speakers. "The board would love to have you present at next month's conference." I adjusted my webcam slightly, ensuring my home office's carefully curated bookshelf remained visible behind me. "I'm honoured, Dorian, but you know my policy about in-person appearances." "Yes, yes, the mysterious Dr. Ava Stone," he chuckled. "Though I must say, your video consultations have revolutionized how we handle complex cases. If only Jonah could see me now, commanding respect from the same medical professionals who used to barely acknowledge me at his hospital fundraisers. But that wasn't why I'd created Dr. Stone. Not entirely." A knock at my door interrupted my thoughts. "Just a moment, Dorian." I muted my microphone. "Come in." Audrey poked her head in. "Mum, I need to talk to you about—" "Oh, sorry, you're working." "Give me 5 minutes, honey." I turned back to my screen. "Dorian, I'll review the conference materials and get back to you tomorrow." After ending the call, I found Audrey waiting in the kitchen, picking at a bowl of cereal. 2 weeks had passed since Jonah's departure, and the dark circles under her eyes told me she wasn't sleeping well. "What's up?" I asked, pouring myself coffee. "Dad called. He wants us to have dinner with him. And her." She practically spat the last word. "And how do you feel about that?" "I told him to go to hell." She pushed her cereal away. "But Gary's considering it. Mom, how are you so calm about all this?" I sat down beside her. "Because I refuse to let his choices destroy what I've built." "What you've built? Mom, you've been a housewife since I was born." The words stung even though I knew they shouldn't. "Actually, there's something I need to tell you and Gary." "Where is he?" "Upstairs, probably texting Dad again." She rolled her eyes. "He's worried about him. Apparently the hospital's having problems." Perfect timing. "Gary?" I called. "Family meeting." Minutes later, we sat in the living room, my children watching me expectantly. I took a deep breath. "What I'm about to tell you needs to stay between us for now." I opened my laptop and pulled up Dr. Stone's website. For the past 5 years, I've been running a medical consulting business. Their blank stares would have been comical under different circumstances. "You're... what?" Gary leaned forward, squinting at the screen. "Dr. Ava Stone," I said, clicking through to my credentials page. "I've been consulting for hospitals across the country, helping with their most challenging cases." "But how?" Audrey's voice was barely a whisper. "When did you... remember those online courses I took while you were in high school? The ones your father dismissed as my hobby?" I smiled. I was completing my master's in healthcare administration. Then came the certifications, the networking, building my reputation. "Does Dad know?" Gary asked. "No. And he's not going to. Not yet." Understanding dawned on Audrey's face. "The hospital's financial troubles. They need someone like Dr. Stone, don't they?" "They do." I closed my laptop. "And eventually they'll find me. But first, I need you both to understand why I kept this secret." "Because of Dad," Gary said flatly. "He would have taken credit for it somehow." Smart boy. "Partly, but mostly because I needed to prove to myself that I could do this on my own." My phone buzzed. Elena's text reminded me of my afternoon consultation. "Mom?" Audrey's voice was different now, filled with something like awe. "How much do you make doing this?" I named a figure that made both their jaws drop. "Holy shit," Gary whispered. "We're not going to lose the house." "Language," I said automatically. "And no, we're not losing anything. In fact..." I hesitated, then decided they deserved to know everything. "I make more than your father does." The silence that followed was broken by unexpected laughter. Audrey's rich, genuine laugh that I hadn't heard since before the divorce announcement. "Oh my God," she gasped. "All those times he talked down to you about money." "Does Elena know?" Gary asked. "She's been my confidant from the start. Speaking of which..." I stood up, gathering my materials for the afternoon call. "I have a consultation in 20 minutes. Questions?" They had dozens, of course, but the most important one came from Audrey. "When are you going to tell him?" "When the time is right." I touched her cheek gently. Sometimes the best revenge isn't about hurting someone. It's about showing them exactly what they failed to see. As I headed back to my office, I heard Gary say, "Damn, our mom's a badass." I smiled, thinking of the email I'd received that morning from Jonah's hospital board. They were looking for an external consultant to help restructure their failing departments. They'd heard wonderful things about Dr. Ava Stone. Sometimes karma works in mysterious ways. And sometimes, if you're patient enough, it works exactly as planned. "The hospital's cutting my department's funding by 30%. Jonah's voice crackled through my phone speaker. "I need to talk to you about the house." I stirred honey into my tea, watching rain streak down the kitchen window. "The house isn't for sale, Jonah." "Avery, be reasonable. We need to liquidate assets." "No, you need to liquidate assets. I'm staying right here with our children." A frustrated sigh. "Can we meet? Please. There are things we need to discuss face to face." I checked my calendar. Dr. Stone had a video consultation in 2 hours. Fine. Coffee shop on Main Street, 1 hour. The cafe was nearly empty when I arrived. Jonah sat in a corner booth looking significantly more disheveled than I remembered. His designer watch was conspicuously absent. "You look well," he said, as I slid into the seat across from him. The surprise in his voice was almost worth the extra time I'd spent on my appearance. "You look terrible." I ordered a latte from the hovering waitress. "Where's Claire?" He flinched. We're taking a break." "Trouble in paradise already? It's only been 3 weeks." "Can we not?" He rubbed his face. "The hospital's in serious trouble, Avery. They're bringing in some hotshot consultant, Dr. Stone. But until then, we're all facing cuts." I sipped my coffee to hide my smile. "Sounds serious." "It is. Look, I know you have no reason to help me, but you're right. I don't. Think of the kids." His voice rose slightly, drawing attention from nearby tables. "This affects their future too. College funds, inheritance." "Their college funds are secure," I cut in. "I made sure of that years ago." He blinked. "What do you mean?" "I mean, I'm not the financial idiot you always assumed I was." I set down my cup. "The kids are taken care of. The house is paid for. Your problems are your own." "How?" His face reddened. "Where did you get the money?" "Mom?" Gary's voice interrupted us. He stood by our table, still in his baseball uniform, looking between us uncertainly. "Everything okay?" "Perfect timing, honey." I stood up. "Your father was just leaving." "Gary, wait." Jonah reached for our son's arm, but Gary stepped back. "Save it, Dad. I heard about Claire dumping you for that farmer rep." He turned to me. "Practice ended early. Need a ride home?" I gathered my purse, leaving Jonah staring at his cooling coffee. Outside, Gary held the umbrella over us both. "Claire left him?" I asked as we walked to the car. "Yeah. Audrey heard from her friend who works at the hospital. Apparently Dad's not such a great catch now that his department's tanking." Back home, I found Audrey in my office, staring at Dr. Stone's website. "Mum, they posted the consultation schedule for Dad's hospital." She pointed to the screen. "You're meeting with the board next week." "Virtually," I reminded her, "but eventually they'll want to meet in person." She spun in my chair. "What are you going to do?" "I'm going to do my job." I perched on the desk edge. "Dr. Stone is going to review their cases, analyze their procedures, and make recommendations to save their departments. Including Dad's, including your father's." I smiled. "Though my recommendation might be that his department needs new leadership." "Savage," Gary called from the doorway. "But won't he lose everything?" "He'll lose what he deserves to lose." I stood up, straightening my blazer. "Now who's hungry? I'm thinking pizza." Later that night, Elena called. "Jonah cornered me at the grocery store," she said without preamble. "He's desperate to figure out how you're managing so well." "What did you tell him?" That maybe he should have paid more attention to his wife instead of his secretary. She paused. The board's talking about Dr. Stone non-stop. They're calling you their last hope. I logged into my email, scanning the latest hospital reports. Their problems go deeper than they realize. The entire management structure needs an overhaul. And Jonah will be treated like any other department head. I opened his department's file. Though his numbers are particularly troubling. Avery, Elena's voice softened, are you sure you can stay objective about this? Watch me. After hanging up, I found both kids in the living room, heads bent over their phones. Dad's texting again, Audrey announced. He wants to know if we've noticed anything different about you lately. If you've been acting strange. What did you say? I told him you seem happier than ever, she grinned, which is true. He's getting desperate, Gary added. Asked if you'd mentioned any new friends or jobs. I sat between them on the couch. You know this might get messy when the truth comes out. Mom, Audrey took my hand, it's already messy, but for once you're the one in control. Yeah, Gary agreed. And honestly, it's pretty cool watching Dad squirm. I squeezed their hands, thinking of next week's board meeting. Soon, Dr. Stone would begin dismantling the hierarchy that had protected men like Jonah for years. And I would enjoy every minute of it. Dr. Stone, your recommendations are quite radical. The hospital board chairman's face filled my screen, his expression a mix of concern and admiration. Particularly regarding the cardiology department. Radical problems require radical solutions, I replied, adjusting my webcam. Dr. Jonah's leadership has cost the hospital millions in inefficiencies and questionable procedures. A new window popped up on my screen, Dorian Mann requesting to join the call. I accepted, keeping my expression neutral as his familiar face appeared. Sorry I'm late, he said. I've been reviewing Dr. Stone's proposals and I have to say they're brilliant. The gala next month would be the perfect venue to present these changes. My heart skipped. The gala? Yes, the annual Medical Excellence Awards. The chairman nodded enthusiastically. Dr. Stone, we insist you attend in person. Your presence would add significant weight to these recommendations. Before I could decline, Dorian jumped in. I've already taken the liberty of nominating you for innovation in healthcare management. The committee was quite impressed. My phone buzzed. Eleanor's text read, It's time. You can't hide forever. I'll consider it, I said carefully. Please send the details. After ending the call, I sat back in my chair, mind racing. The door creaked open and Audrey slipped in. Mom, Dad's downstairs. What? I stood up quickly. Why? He looks awful, she wrung her hands. Gary let him in. He's crying. I found Jonah in our living room, head in his hands. Gary hovered nearby, looking uncomfortable. They're going to fire me, Jonah said without looking up. This consultant, Dr. Stone, the recommendations just came through. My whole department is being restructured. That's not my problem, I said, but my voice wavered slightly. He finally looked up, eyes red. Please, Avery. You always knew how to fix things. Help me figure this out. Like you helped me when I wanted to go back to school. The words shot out before I could stop them. Or when I suggested improvements to your practice billing system. I was wrong, he whispered. I was so wrong about everything. Gary stepped forward. Mom, maybe... No, I cut him off. Your father made his choices. Now he's facing the consequences. The consequences, Jonah stood up. I'm about to lose everything, my practice, my reputation. Your secretary. I couldn't resist. He deflated. Claire's engaged to someone else now. It's been barely 2 months and she's... Calm as a bitch, isn't it? Audrey appeared in the doorway, arms crossed. Language, I said automatically, then turned back to Jonah. You need to leave. Wait. He pulled out his phone. Look at these recommendations. This Dr. Stone, they're ruthless but brilliant. If I could just meet them, explain my side. I glanced at the familiar document on his screen. My own words condemning his years of mismanagement. My phone rang displaying Elena's name. I need to take this. In my office, Elena didn't waste time. The gala invitation just hit my inbox. Dorian Mann is determined to have Dr. Stone there. I know. I sank into my chair. Jonah's downstairs right now begging for help. Oh, this is perfect. I could hear her grinning. Walk into that gala like the queen you are, accept that award and watch his face when... Mom? Gary appeared in the doorway. Dad's still here. He's talking about selling his car to keep the practice afloat. Eleanor heard him. Don't you dare feel sorry for him, Avery. I ended the call and returned to the living room. Jonah had pulled out more papers, spreading them across the coffee table. Look at these numbers, he was telling our children. If I can just prove to Dr. Stone that my department is worth saving. By fudging the figures? I picked up one of the sheets. Like you did last quarter. He froze. How did you... Get out, Jonah. I gathered the papers. And stop trying to involve our children in your professional failures. After he left, both kids stared at me. You're going to that gala, right? Audrey asked. You have to. It's time, Mom, Gary added. Show them all who you really are. My phone buzzed again. An email from Dorian Mann. Dr. Stone, I've taken the liberty of booking your hotel suite for the gala weekend. The awards committee is particularly excited about your work on hospital restructuring. Your presence would mean everything to the medical community. I looked at my children's eager faces, then at the family photo still hanging on the wall, taken years ago when I was just Jonah's supportive wife. Elena, I called her back. Book yourself a room for the gala weekend. I'm going to need my best friend there. Finally, she exclaimed. What made you decide? I watched Gary picking up Jonah's scattered papers, Audrey already scrolling through formal dress websites on her phone. Because it's time for Dr. Stone to step into the light, I said, and for Avery to step out of the shadows. The medical community won't know what hit them, Elena laughed. Neither would Jonah. The hotel ballroom sparkled with crystal chandeliers and medical elite. I adjusted my midnight blue gown, touching the name tag that read, Dr. Ava Stone for reassurance. Stop fidgeting, Elena whispered beside me. You look amazing. I see him. I nodded toward the bar where Jonah stood with other department heads, his rented tuxedo slightly ill-fitting. He has no idea I'm here. Ladies and gentlemen, Dorian Mann's voice boomed through the speakers. Please take your seats for dinner. We found our table near the podium. My hands shook slightly as I unfolded my napkin. Dr. Stone, a woman approached our table. I'm Autumn Wolfe from Medical Weekly. Would you mind if I asked you a few questions later? After the awards, I promised, watching Jonah being seated 3 tables away. Dorian took the stage, his silver hair catching the spotlight. Tonight, we honor those who have transformed modern medicine. But first, let me introduce our keynote speaker, the brilliant consultant who's revolutionizing hospital management across the country, Dr. Ava Stone. The applause was thunderous. Eleanor squeezed my hand as I stood. You've got this, she whispered. I approached the podium feeling hundreds of eyes on me. In the middle distance, I saw Jonah's face, politely attentive but unrecognizing. Thank you, Dorian. My voice carried clearly through the microphone. Before I begin, I'd like to share a story about underestimated potential. The room quieted. 23 years ago, I put my dreams on hold to support my husband through medical school. I was told to be content as just a doctor's wife. I paused, meeting Jonah's eyes directly. He told me I wouldn't understand the complexities of his work. Jonah's expression shifted from confusion to dawning horror. But what he didn't know was that I spent years studying, learning, and building something of my own. While he dismissed my little hobbies, I was earning my master's degree. While he belittled my suggestions about his practice, I was consulting for major hospitals. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Jonah half rose from his chair. My name is Dr. Ava Stone, but some of you might know me better as Avery, the former wife of Dr. Jonah from Metropolitan General. The gasps were audible. Autumn Wolfe was frantically taking notes. The recommendations I've made for Metropolitan weren't born of malice, but of professional assessment. Every criticism, every suggested reform is backed by data. I lifted my chin. Including those regarding the cardiology department. This is impossible, Jonah's voice carried across the silent room. You're lying. Actually, Dorian stepped forward. Dr. Stone's credentials are impeccable. Her work has saved countless lives and millions of dollars. And now, I continued, my voice steady, I'm honored to accept this award not just for myself, but for every person who's been told they're not enough. Success is the best revenge, but competence? That's revolutionary. The standing ovation was immediate. Through tears, I saw Eleanor cheering, Autumn Wolf pushing through the crowd toward me, and Jonah slumping in his chair. Later, during dinner, Dorian raised his glass. To Dr. Stone, who proves that diamonds form under pressure. Mom? My phone buzzed with Audrey's text. You're trending on Twitter. Gary's recording the local news coverage. Jonah appeared at my table, swaying slightly. How could you do this to me? I didn't do anything to you, I replied calmly. I simply became who I always was. Dr. Stone, Autumn touched my arm. Would you comment on the gender bias in medical administration? Of course. I stood, smoothing my dress. But first, I believe my ex-husband was leaving. Security appeared silently, escorting a protesting Jonah out. Elena clinked her glass against mine. Worth waiting for? She asked. Every second. I turned to Autumn. Now, about that interview. The next hour passed in a blur of photographers, reporters, and congratulations. My phone buzzed constantly with messages from the kids. Dr. Stone, Dorian approached with a distinguished group. The board from Mayo Clinic would like to discuss a consulting opportunity. As I shook hands and exchanged cards, Elena slipped me a note. Jonah's outside, crying to anyone who'll listen. Claire just walked past him without even looking. I excused myself and stepped onto the balcony for air. The city lights sparkled below, matching the diamonds at my throat, bought with my own money, earned under my own name. Quite a night, Dorian joined me. You've caused quite a stir in the medical community. Change usually does. Your recommendations for Metropolitan? He hesitated. They'll be implemented in full, including the leadership changes. I nodded, thinking of Jonah's department. Sometimes healing requires surgery. Dr. Stone, Autumn called from the doorway. The Associated Press is on the line. I straightened my shoulders, feeling lighter than I had in years. Time to face the music. No, Dorian smiled. Time to conduct the orchestra. Inside, cameras flashed and questions flew, but all I could think was, finally, gloriously, free. Dr. Stone, how do you respond to allegations that your consulting work was motivated by personal vendetta? Autumn Wolf's microphone thrust toward my face as I tried to enter my office building. My work stands on its own merit, I replied, pushing through the crowd of reporters. The data speaks for itself. Your ex-husband claims you deliberately targeted his department, another reporter shouted. Elena appeared at my elbow, creating a path through the media circus. No more questions. Dr. Stone has appointments. Inside my office, I collapsed into my chair, watching the chaos through tinted windows. My phone rang, Audrey's face appearing on screen. Mum, have you seen the news? They're camping outside my dorm. I'm so sorry, honey. I never meant for this to affect you. Are you kidding? My roommate thinks you're a badass. She paused. But Mom, Dad's been calling non-stop. He's pretty messed up. My computer pinged with an incoming video call from Dorian. Sweetie, I need to take this. We'll talk later. Dorian's usually composed face looked strained. Avery, the board's concerned about the media attention. Your recommendations are solid, but the personal connection is irrelevant, I finished firmly. My analysis was objective and thorough. The thing is, he hesitated. Jonah's given an interview, it's not flattering. My phone buzzed again, Gary this time. Mum, Dad's on TV. It's bad. I switched on the office television. There was Jonah, looking disheveled, speaking to a sympathetic interviewer. She orchestrated this whole thing, his voice cracked. Used inside knowledge of our family, our hospital, to destroy everything I built. Turn it off, Elena commanded, entering with coffee. You don't need to hear this. But I couldn't look away. The interviewer was showing photos now. Our wedding, hospital fundraisers, family vacations, making me look like a calculating villain. Dr. Stone, my assistant poked her head in, your daughter's here. Audrey burst through the door, still wearing her college sweatshirt. This is insane. There are reporters everywhere. What are you doing here? You should be at school. Classes got disrupted. She threw her bag down. Everyone's talking about it. Some people are saying horrible things about you. My phone lit up with texts from Gary. Dad's supporters are protesting outside the hospital. They're saying you abused your position. Eleanor grabbed the remote, muting Jonah's continuing interview. We need a strategy. Now. Mom? Audrey's voice was small. What if they're right? What if revenge wasn't worth all this? I stood up, smoothing my blazer. This isn't about revenge, this is about truth. Dr. Stone, my assistant called again, Autumn Wolfe is insisting on speaking with you. She says she has information you need to hear. I nodded. Send her in. Autumn entered, tablet in hand. You need to see this. Your ex-husband's interview. He left out some crucial details. She played a video. Claire, Jonah's former secretary, speaking to another reporter. Dr. Jonah knew about the department's problems months ago. He falsified reports, covered up mistakes. I left because I couldn't be part of it. Can we use this? Eleanor asked. Better. Autumn smiled. I've got testimonies from other hospital staff. Dr. Stone's recommendations weren't just accurate, they were necessary. My phone buzzed again. Dorian. The board's reviewed everything. We're standing behind you, Avery. Your work saved lives. Audrey hugged me suddenly. I'm proud of you, Mom, even with all this crazy stuff. Speaking of crazy, Elena pointed to the window, look who's here. Jonah stood in the parking lot below, surrounded by reporters. Our eyes met through the glass. He wants to talk, Gary texted. Says he'll tell the truth if you'll meet with him. I looked at the faces around me, Eleanor's concern, Audrey's worry, Autumn's professional interest. Set up a press conference, I told Autumn. It's time everyone heard the whole story. Are you sure? Eleanor touched my arm. Once you do this, there's no going back. I stopped going back the day he left. I turned to Audrey. Call your brother. I want both of you there. What are you going to say? She asked. I watched Jonah being swarmed by cameras below. The truth. All of it. About his department's failures, about my qualifications, about everything. It'll destroy him, Elena warned. No, I corrected. His own actions destroyed him. I'm just bringing them to light. My phone lit up with another text from Gary. On my way. Give him hell, Mom. Autumn was already making calls. I can have everyone here in an hour. Major networks are interested. I looked around my office. At the degrees I'd earned in secret, the awards I'd won as Dr. Stone, the life I'd built from the ashes of my marriage. 1 hour, I agreed. Let's end this story properly. Eleanor squeezed my hand. Ready to face the music? I thought of all the times I'd stayed quiet, played small, been invisible. No more hiding, I said. It's time for the whole world to meet the real Dr. Stone. Outside, cameras flashed and reporters waited. But for the first time since this storm began, I felt completely calm. The truth was my shield, and I was ready to use it. The conference room buzzed with tension as cameras rolled. Jonah sat across the table, his lawyer whispering urgently in his ear. Gary and Audrey flanked me like protective bodyguards. Thank you all for coming, I began, my voice steady. Recent events have raised questions about my professional integrity and motivations. Today, we'll address them all. Autumn Wolfe leaned forward with her recorder. Dr. Stone, would you respond to allegations of personal bias? Actually, Jonah interrupted, standing suddenly. I'd like to speak first. The room fell silent. My children tensed beside me. 23 years ago, he said, his voice rough, I married an incredible woman. She put me through medical school, raised our children, supported my career, and I... He swallowed hard. I made her believe she wasn't enough. Dad, Gary whispered, but I touched his arm, signaling him to wait. When the board hired Dr. Stone, Avery, to evaluate our hospital, I didn't know it was her. But looking at these recommendations now, he lifted a thick folder. Every criticism is valid. Every suggestion for improvement is spot on. I wasn't just a bad husband. I was a negligent department head. Cameras clicked rapidly. Autumn scribbled notes. The reports I altered, the procedures I pushed through. Jonah looked directly at me. You knew about all of it, didn't you? I did my research, I replied carefully, as Dr. Stone always does. The thing is, he continued, she could have destroyed me completely, could have exposed everything at once. Instead, she gave our department a chance to reform, to do better. He laughed bitterly. Even taking revenge, she thought about patient care first. Elena, watching from the corner, gave me a subtle nod. It wasn't revenge, I said, standing to face him. It was justice. For every suggestion you dismissed, every idea you belittled, every time you made me feel small, I built something bigger, something that helps people. Mom, Audrey touched my hand, tears in her eyes. The hospital board has reviewed all materials, I continued, addressing the reporters now. Dr. Stone's consulting firm will continue working with Metropolitan General, implementing necessary changes, including new leadership for the cardiology department. You're firing me? Jonah asked quietly. No. You're being offered a position as a staff physician under new management. Your surgical skills were never in question. Your leadership was. The reporters erupted with questions. Through the chaos, Jonah stepped around the table until he stood before me. I'm sorry, he said, voice cracking, not for losing my position or for the public humiliation. I'm sorry for not seeing you, really seeing you, all those years. Dad's crying, Gary muttered. I've never seen him cry. Avery, Jonah continued, you were never just my wife. You were always meant for more. I was too threatened to admit it. Autumn stood up. Dr. Stone, what happens now? I looked at my children's faces, at Eleanor's proud smile, at Jonah's tear-stained cheeks. Now we heal. Metropolitan General will implement reforms. Dr. Jonah will continue saving lives, under proper supervision. And I'll keep doing what I do best, fixing broken systems. And us? Jonah asked softly. There is no us anymore. I straightened my shoulders. But there can be peace. For the kids' sake. Speaking of kids, Gary stepped forward. We have something to say. Audrey joined him. We've watched both our parents these past months. One tried to hide mistakes and blame others. The other built something amazing and owned her truth. We choose truth, Gary finished. We choose Mom. The press conference ended shortly after, but Jonah lingered as the reporters filed out. Claire called, he said. Wanted to apologize for the mess. I told her you were the best thing that ever happened to me, and I was too blind to see it. Water under the bridge, I replied, gathering my papers. The thing is... He hesitated. I need your help. Not as my ex-wife, but as Dr. Stone. Help me become better at my job. Please. I studied his face, the familiar wrinkles, the new humility in his eyes. Professional consultation only. My standard rates apply. Thank you. He turned to our children. I'm sorry I disappointed you both. I'd like to earn back your respect if you'll let me. Audrey hugged him briefly. Start by accepting Mom's brilliance. Really accepting it. Already have, he smiled sadly. The whole medical community has. After he left, Elena brought me coffee. You okay? Better than okay. I watched through the window as Jonah spoke with his lawyer. For the first time in forever, everything's exactly as it should be. Mom? Gary showed me his phone. You're trending again. But this time they're calling you both brave and brilliant. Imagine that, I smiled. A woman can be both. Autumn poked her head back in. Dr. Stone, Mayo Clinic is still waiting for your answer about that consulting offer. I looked at my children, my best friend, my new life stretching out before me. Tell them I'll review their proposal, right after I take my kids to dinner. Because sometimes the best revenge isn't revenge at all. It's living your truth, out loud and unapologetically, while those who once diminished you watch you soar. Dr. Stone, your next appointment is here, my assistant called through the intercom. I closed the Mayo Clinic proposal on my desk and smoothed my blazer. Send them in. The door opened, revealing Jonah, clean-shaven, properly dressed, holding a thick folder, different from the broken man at the press conference 3 weeks ago. Thank you for seeing me, he said, taking a seat. I've prepared a complete overview of my surgical outcomes for your review. Professional and thorough, I noted, accepting the folder. I'm impressed. I learned from the best. He managed a small smile. The new department head is implementing your recommendations. It's humbling, being supervised by someone younger. A knock interrupted us. Audrey burst in, her college textbook clutched to her chest. Mom. Oh, hi, Dad. Come in, honey. I waved her forward. Your father and I were just finishing up. Actually, she hesitated, I wanted to talk to both of you. I'm changing my major to healthcare administration. Jonah's eyebrows shot up. But you were set on art history. Yeah, well, watching Mom build something amazing made me realize what I really want. She turned to me. Would Dr. Stone consider an intern? My phone buzzed. Eleanor's text read, Turn on the news now. I grabbed the remote, flicking on the office TV. A familiar face filled the screen, Claire speaking at a podium. As the new hospital compliance officer, she was saying, I'm committed to maintaining the high standards set by Dr. Stone's consultancy. Jonah let out a surprised laugh. She got the job? After everything? She was qualified, I said simply. Personal history doesn't negate professional capability. You taught me that. Mom! Gary appeared in the doorway still in his baseball uniform. Did you see? They're using your reforms as a model for other hospitals. I looked at my family gathered in my office, not broken, just reorganized. Different, but maybe better. Dr. Stone, my assistant called again. Dorian Mann is on line 1. The medical conference committee wants to know if you'll deliver the keynote address. Audrey's eyes lit up. Can I help prepare your presentation? Actually, I smiled, I think it's time for Dr. Stone to share the spotlight. Jonah, your research on minimally invasive procedures could make an excellent addition. He blinked in surprise. You've read my research. I read everything that crosses my desk. Your methods are innovative, even if your management wasn't. Speaking of management, Gary pulled out his phone. Elena's downstairs with the contract for the new consulting firm. Stone and Associates. Partners, I corrected. Stone and Partners, because success isn't a solo achievement. Jonah stood, gathering his papers. I should go. Thank you for everything. Dad. Wait, Audrey called. We're getting dinner. Want to join us? As a family? He looked at me questioningly. I nodded. First, I said, I need you all to understand something. What happened between your father and me? The hurt, the betrayal, the secrets. That's over. But what we build now, that's up to us. No more lies, Gary asked. No more hiding, Jonah agreed. My assistant appeared one last time. Dr. Stone, they're ready for your video consultation with London General. Actually, I smiled, tell them we'll reschedule. I'm having dinner with my family. Later, at our favourite Italian restaurant, Eleanor joined us with the contracts. Audrey sketched logos on her napkin, while Gary debated medical ethics with Jonah. You know, Eleanor whispered, this isn't how revenge usually looks. Maybe revenge was never the point, I replied, watching my family, broken but healing, separate but connected. Maybe it was about becoming who we were always meant to be. Dr. Stone, a voice called from across the restaurant. Autumn Wolfe approached our table, notebook in hand. Any comment on the national adoption of your hospital reforms? I looked at my children's proud faces, at Jonah's quiet acceptance, at Eleanor's knowing smile. Actually, yes. Success isn't about destroying what's broken. It's about building something better from the pieces. Mom, Audrey touched my arm, your phone's buzzing. Mayo Clinic again. Let it go to voicemail, I said. Right now, I'm not Dr. Stone. I'm just Avery having dinner with my family. No, Jonah spoke up. You're both. You always were. We just didn't see it. To Dr. Stone, Gary raised his water glass. And to Mom, the same amazing woman finally seen. As glasses clinked and conversation flowed, I realized something profound. The greatest victory wasn't in proving Jonah wrong or becoming Dr. Stone. It was in finally, completely becoming myself. Mother, professional, survivor, pioneer. And that was better than revenge could ever be. So, Audrey grinned, pulling out her laptop. About that internship, the future stretched before us, not perfect, but real. Not what I'd planned, but somehow exactly right. Because sometimes the happy ending isn't about getting even. It's about getting free.